We've got a 3 by 3 system here, 3 variables, 3 equations, and you can clearly see we're missing some variables in each of the equations. But we're going to use a matrix method to solve this system by first putting it into the augmented form. So I'm just going to read down the columns, put in the coefficients. So I got 1, 0, right, because there's 0x, 1, 0, 4. So our first column is a 1, 0, 4. Second column will be a 2, 1, and 0. Third column, a 0, 1, negative 1, our vertical line, and the constants, 3, 3, 2. There's our augmented matrix. Well, let's see, we have a 1 in the top left corner. All right, that's going to be our pivot element. So I'm going to use 1 and 2. Actually, I don't have to use 2, right? We already have a 0 here. So I'm just going to pivot on 1 and 3. That's nice. But I'm going to circle this 1 as my pivot. And then I'm going to say that row 3, all right, row 3 is going to become, right now, here's how this always works. I take I want to turn this number to 0. So I take the opposite of this number and I multiply it through the pivot row. So the opposite of this number is negative 4. So I will take negative 4, multiply it through row 1, right, the pivot row, and then I'm going to add that to row 3. And here's what that looks like. So take that negative 4, multiply it through that very first row, and it's going to look like this. Negative 4, negative 8, 0, negative 12. Now I'm going to circle that and say I'm going to add that to row 3. So this will be the new matrix. Okay, I'll write it right up alongside here. Row 1 and 2 stayed the same. 1, 2, 0, 3, 0, 1, 1, 3. And now, to get row 3, take the current row 3, add it to our circled row 3. So, component-wise, first and first, 4 plus negative 4 is 0. Then, right, 0. And plus negative 8 is negative 8. And then, negative 1 added to 0 is negative 1. And then, what do we have here? 2 added to negative 12 is negative 10. All right, that's our second matrix. Now, we've made some progress here. Our first column is complete. I got a 1 and zeros below it. Now, to the right one, down one, right on our main diagonal, I want 1s. We already have a 1 here. That's awfully nice. So that is going to be our pivot. And then what I want is, I'm going to use that one and that one to get zeros here and here. So row 1 is going to become, now you know what to do here. You take the opposite of that number and multiply it through the pivot row. So the opposite of 2 is negative 2. I'll multiply it through row 2, and then I'm going to add that result to row 1. And here's what it all looks like. So negative 2, multiply it all the way through what our pivot row right here. So we will get 0, negative 2, negative 2, negative 6. I'll circle that, and I'm going to eventually add that to row 1. So you see what I did here. I took that negative 2, right, the opposite of that, negative 2, and multiplied it right through here. 0, negative 2, negative 2, negative 6. Now, what about row 3? Row 3, well, row 3 is going to become, what's our number here? Negative 8. So take its opposite, positive 8, multiply positive 8 through that row. So positive 8 times row 2 plus row 3. And that's going to look like this. All right, so I'm taking the 8, multiplying it all the way through here. So it will be 0, 8, 8, 24. I'll circle that, and then we will, in just a minute, add it to row 3. So here's our third matrix. All right, our third matrix is going to be the current row 1 added to this circled row 1. So it's just component-wise. So first plus first. 1 and 0 is 1. Then 2 and negative 2 is 0. That's what we were going for. Then 0 and negative 2 is negative 2. There's our line, and then 3 and negative 6 is negative 3. All right, so there's our new row 1. Row 2 stays the same. 0, 1, 1, 3. But now the new row 3 is going to be the current row 3 right here. I'm right up here. And I'm going to add that to the circled row 3 right here. So component-wise, okay, first and first, 0 plus 0 is 0. Then, where are we? Negative 8 plus 8 is 0. Then, negative 1 and 8 is 7. And then, negative 10 and 24 is 14. Okay, good. We've got a lot of progress done. We've got the first column done, right? I got a 1 and zeros below it. Over and 1, down that diagonal. I got a 1 here, zeros above and below. One more column to go. Okay, over and down, right? We want 1s on that diagonal. So I got to get zeros here and a 1 here. I can get a 1 here if I divide by 7. So the plan then is to take row 3 and exchange that with the current row 3 divided by 7. So let's do that, all right? So the first two rows stay the same. 1, 0, negative 2, and negative 3. 0, 1, 1, 3. Now divide this third row by 7. 0, 0, 1, and 2. How nice, no fractions. Now, this is my pivot element here. So I'm going to use that to get a 0 here and a 0 here. So we're going to change row 1 and row 2. Row 1 is going to become, now what do? You take the opposite of that number, that's the one we want to change to a 0. Take its opposite, multiply it through the pivot row. So positive 2, right? Opposite, positive 2 times all of those numbers right there. So row 1 is going to become 2 times row 3 plus row 1. It's going to look like this. Multiply 2 through that last row. 0, 0, 2, and 4. I'll circle that, and then we'll add it to row 1. And row 2, we need to change that one. Well, row 2 is going to become, what have we got? That's a 1. Take its opposite, negative 1. So I'll take negative 1, multiply it through the pivot row, 3, and then I'll add that to row 2. It looks like this. All right, take that negative 1, write the opposite. Negative 1, multiply it through all 4 of those. So we will get 0, 0, negative 1, negative 2. And I'll circle that, and I'm going to add that in just a minute here to row 2. So let's add these, and this I think will be our final matrix. So what about that first row? Take the current first row, add it to this circled first row, component-wise. So first and first, add those together. You get a 1. Second and second, 0 and 0. You get a 0. Yep, you get a 0. And then third and third, negative 2 and 2 is a 0. That's a 0 we were after. And then negative 3 and 4 is a 1. So I can see now x is going to be 1. And what about row 2? To get row 2, let's take the current row 2, add it to the circled row 2, and first is that 0 right there. And then the second, 1 and 0 is a 1. And then the third and third, so that 1 and negative 1 is 0. That's another 0 we were after. And then 3 and negative 2, that's a 1. And our row 3 stays the same at 0, 0, 1, 2. Now we can read off our solutions, keeping in mind that that first column is our x's, second column is the y's, and the third column is the z's. So we are going to have x equals 1, y equals 1, z equals 2. And you see where I'm getting it? 1x, no y's, no z's is 1. So 1x, no y's or z's, so just 1x is 1. No x, one y, no z. So just one y is 1 and one z is 2. Or I can write this as an ordered triple, 1, 1, 2, indicating the point at which the three planes intersect.